We have all heard the saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Clarkson and Kanye West even have songs about this. We also repeat it to others when they're going through a hard time or facing a challenge. It's something that we have just come to understand as a way of life. The byproduct of any struggle is that it makes you better afterwards. But this is a lie. We have been lied to, and then we continue to lie to others. In this video, I will share with you what you haven't been told about the saying and the research that's behind it. Hey, I'm Ivana. Welcome to my channel where I talk about how to apply the science of habits to design the life that you want. If you need some help figuring out how to be more actionable with change, you're in the right place. I'm also on Instagram and TikTok if you want to digest this material in different ways, or if you just want to see more of me, you can follow me on there. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, like and comment on this video, and let's dive in. We have all heard this phrase many times in our life. Endless quotes on social media to remind you that even if something is sucking right now, this will only make you better. Suffering builds strong people, except that it doesn't. The saying goes, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, but the research says what doesn't kill you makes you stronger only if you perceive that you have some control over the situation. Otherwise, the suffering leads to helplessness. Oh, this sounds completely different now. So in other words, if you feel like you're suffering and something is just happening to you, there's nothing that you can do about it, it's out of your hands, you're just gonna get through it and it's not gonna make you stronger. In fact, it's gonna make you weaker. If you struggle and you still feel like you have some kind of choice, you have some options, then you perceive yourself to have some control. This perception of control that you have leads you to become stronger afterwards. If you don't see that you have control in a situation, then you're just purely enduring and giving up, which teaches you that things are just going to keep happening to you in the future and that there's nothing that you can do to change anything. So instead of fighting next time, you have an obstacle, you are a lot more likely to just surrender. You learn to be helpless. Whether the equation of suffering equals stronger people actually happens has a lot more to do with the mindset than it has to do with the fact of it just being a part of life. In the book Grit by Angela Duckworth, she talks about psychology experiments conducted that shed more light on the why of the situation. In 1964, psychology doctoral students Marty Seligman and Steve Mayer conducted experiments with pairs of dogs. These pairs of dogs would receive electrical shocks to the back of their paws. One of the dogs would have the option of pushing a panel with their nose that would enable them to stop the shocks, while the other dog wouldn't have that option. The zap would last 5 seconds. Both of the dogs would be zapped the same amount of times, but only one of them would have control over how much they suffered. Those same dogs were placed into a different environment the next day where they would both get shocked, but both dogs would have the option of jumping over a little barrier to escape into a different area where there wouldn't be shocks. They would both be given a chance to control the entire situation. The dog that had control the day before would jump over the barrier almost every single time. And 2/3 of the dogs that didn't get an option of control the day before would just stay in the same area and take that abuse. So 1 in 3 dogs would take the opportunity to actually save themselves. You would think, well, the problem is probably that they didn't have an opportunity to save themselves the first time, so if you gave them an option the second time, the dogs would have taken it. But having the option the second time, it didn't change anything. This was the first experiment that showed that suffering without perceived control leads to hopelessness, which therefore leads to helplessness. Many years later, the same duo, the psychologists, not the dogs, conducted more experiments to find out whether age has anything to do with this learned helplessness or resilience that's there. This time they did the experiment with rats, adolescent rats. They did the same thing. One of the rats would have control over the shocks while the other one didn't. What was different in this experiment was that they didn't repeat it the next day. They would actually wait a few weeks till the rats would be adults to see if age had anything to do with all of this. And what they found was that the younger the rats were when they had perceived control over the situation, those same rats would then grow up to actually be more resilient. And if they didn't have control, then they would grow up to be more timid and more helpless. So it's not just suffering alone that makes you stronger, it's also perceived control over the suffering that makes the difference. And it's also something that we learn at a very young age. If we have learned in our earlier life that we have control over our situation, we learn to be more resilient. If we feel that everything is out of our hands, things are just happening to us and we're enduring, then we learn to be helpless. It's more like what doesn't kill you makes you helpless. Now, this doesn't just apply to very tragic or traumatic events. This could be something much, much smaller in comparison. So how do we take these experiments and apply it to people? The rejection from the sports team, the trying your hand at something that you were really excited about only to learn that you weren't skilled enough to continue on the way that you wanted. It's not fitting in with others, it's not getting those grades that you hoped for, not getting into the program that you wanted, maybe getting fired or getting dumped, COVID. Those are our shocks. What does helplessness look like for us? Complaining about situations that we feel like we can't do anything about when there are options. Feeling like failures when things don't work out the way that we hoped. Being scared to lose or fail in any kind of a way. When we encounter rejection or setbacks, we tell ourselves that we're not good enough, we're not smart enough to get past this. What makes sense is that we actually see this kind of thing over and over. You know someone who's had a setback eons ago and they never seem to have recovered from it. These events change them permanently and they have never managed to get back on their feet. Someone is still talking years later, oh, well, if I didn't get cut by this coach back in high school, I would have done this. Or if I hadn't been rejected from that team or that school, or that person didn't break up with me. Meanwhile, in comparison, there's someone else who has been through something way, way worse, scraping by, barely making enough to make their ends meet, and somehow they found strength to continue on. It's the Michael Jordans who got cut from their high school basketball team and didn't let that define them. This all kind of sounds like just good old pessimism and optimism. And if that is what you were thinking, then you're absolutely right. We are all familiar with what these two types of people look like. We encounter them all the time. So what differentiates optimism from pessimism? And is this something that we learn, or is this just something that we are given? The difference between optimism and pessimism is that optimism searches for temporary and specific causes for their suffering. It's not that everything is always great, it's that even when things don't go right, it's not viewed as a permanent thing. Pessimism views their suffering as more permanent and pervasive, meaning that this could influence a lot more situations in their life. An optimist explanation to not getting the work done, let's say, would be something like, I mismanaged my time, or I got distracted with other things. These are temporary things which can be fixed and wouldn't be affecting future situations. A pessimist answer might be, it's because I can't get anything done. This sounds way more permanent and way harder to fix. How do you improve on never getting anything done? Also, if you are someone who seems to never get anything done, this is definitely something that would follow you or could follow you to future situations. We all know that being optimistic is better for our well-being in the long run. This is proven. Optimistic people are happier with their life, they are happier in their jobs and relationships, and they get through their setbacks a lot easier. They are more likely to look for solutions to their problems, and hence they also tend to find more solutions and tend to work through them. It's definitely a trait on the wish list, but it's a lot harder to do for some of us. So what is the link between optimism and pessimism in the cards that we are dealt? Is optimism genetic, or can we learn it? If you recall from the experiments about the dogs, a third of the dogs from the experiments that didn't have control did jump over that barrier to a safer spot the next time around. So it does seem like we are able to persevere even if we didn't have control earlier. What made them different? Optimism made them different. Good news, it's something that we can learn by adopting a growth mindset. A growth mindset is the mindset of not yet. I'm not there yet, but I'm on the path too. Do you gravitate more towards being optimistic or pessimistic? If you're interested in learning more about this, then subscribe to this channel, turn on the notifications so you don't miss this next video that I'll be dropping for you in a few days that dives a lot deeper into all of this.